Thank you all so much for joining us today. I'm really, really excited about this conversation for many reasons, the content, obviously, but also because Tanya is here joining us. And I'll talk a little bit about Tanya and her background before I kind of ask her to introduce herself as well. But today's session is really focused on accelerating your operations division, businesses, and also just in general digitizing your overall back office, middle office, and sometimes even business functions using platforms like Uncork. Tanya, in particular, has an amazing career of digital transformation across large financial services institutions, and most recently, she's also joined the Goldman Sachs and leads quite a large team there. I'm going to talk a little bit about her background real quick off paper, but I had the personal benefit of being able to work with Tanya for a couple of years back when I was at Goldman Sachs working in the Marcus division, and she really has been an agent for change for bringing the bank to the cloud, bringing these new business lines to fruition for across consumer, and to go a little bit into kind of her role. Tanya is the head of the Consumer Strategic Initiatives and Execution team. In this role, she partners with the consumer and divisional leaders across the firm to execute strategic initiatives for the consumer business, delivering innovative technology and best-in-class products to the firm's customers. She's also a member of the Consumer and Wealth Management Inclusion and Diversity Council. Tanya joined Goldman Sachs in 2018 as a VP and was named Managing Director in 2021. Prior to joining the firm, Tanya was a Corporate Strategy Director at KPMG. We have a lot of KPMG folks both here and at Uncork, so very excited about that, where she led and developed the implementation of strategic roadmaps at large corporations, mostly financial services institutions. Previously, she held senior roles at Deloitte and American Express, where she had led organizational transformation programs. She earned a BS in accounting from Binghamton University in 2005. Definitely want to thank Tanya for joining us. And if you want to briefly talk, I know I went through a bunch, but.
Well, now that he's gone through it all, I'm not sure what I'm going to say. But thank you, Christian and Uncork, for having me today. I'm really excited today to talk to everybody here. But my career has gone through, as you can see, various turns. So I studied accounting, but I do nothing with accounting right now. I'm focused on digital transformation. And so when I joined Goldman Sachs in 2018, I joined to oversee their Clarity Money acquisition and the integration of that. And so I'll get into that a bit later. But right now, what I focus on is managing our overall roadmap. So what are all the things that we want to do in consumer? How are we going to do them? How many people do we have? Do we have capacity, prioritization, and all of that fun stuff that goes with managing a roadmap? For other businesses, it might be similar to like an enterprise PMO. And we are agile, so we followed the SAFe methodology, which is scaled agile framework for anybody who's familiar with that.
Awesome. So your role really spans quite a bit of that business portfolio. Can you talk about some of the products that you're really helping to enable and also bring to market?
So one of the things I was most excited about joining Goldman Sachs was that typically Goldman Sachs is known for serving institutional and corporate clients. Back around 2015, they started this idea of Marcus and really serving customers. And so what they did was take a customer-centric view and build out what are the things that customers need in order to spend, save, borrow in their life and have basically a bank in their wallet. And when I say wallet, I mean like your telephone. On iOS, you have a wallet, etc. So with that in mind, we're also strong believers in embedded finance. And what that means is we want to embed our products in different partners. So for example, we have a partnership with Apple, right? And so we were able to create the Apple credit card. And what that means is we have access to millions of customers, and it's a product that customers love, and we're able to partner with them to embed our financial products with them. We've also done this with GM, and their customers are very loyal, and so we have a GM credit card as well. And we recently acquired GreenSky, and GreenSky provides loans for people who are interested in doing home renovations.
And what's really impressive about Tanya's role and her team is that they're embedded across all of these business lines, and they're helping drive that change, that build, and really understand how to bring that roadmap to fruition. And I think that kind of goes in line with my next question, which is really just in general about how software development can be challenging. That's a lot of coordination, especially when you're at a big bank. You've got tons of different teams that need to be involved in that process. And with that, it means you need to be planning your architecture out, your design, managing your kind of customer's experiences, and understanding what the experience is that they're looking for. And really, the backbone of that is this transformation function, and the one that you essentially lead across this organization. Can you tell me about some of those really big challenges that you face in that process of bringing kind of this large-scale orchestration of bringing these apps to fruition for the company?
Thank you for that, Christian. As you mentioned, it is highly complex, challenging, and we also have really aggressive roadmaps in regards to everything that we want to do. And so what I'd say, some of the biggest challenges that we face in wanting to build these things is, one, we assess. Do we build? Do we buy? Do we partner? So once we've made that assessment, if we decide it's something we want to build, then it's about resources. Do we have enough people to do these things? Do we have the right skill sets? So making sure that we're able to, if we don't have these people, we're acquiring the resources that are needed to do this. And then the other thing that we look at as well is how are we going to work cross-functionally? And so we make sure as we're setting up a new build or a new product, we're thinking about setting up the teams for success. What does the pod structure look like? And thinking about each of the domains that are needed. So when I mean domain is onboarding. How are we thinking about onboarding? How are we thinking about money movement? How are we thinking about our agents? How are they going to serve our customers? But just going back to one of the points I made earlier, as well as we're building new products, we're also very focused on our customer approach and thinking about what do customers want, and that leads the way we're thinking about building and then structuring the teams in that manner. The other complexity is when you have cross-functional teams and you have hundreds of people and you're working across not only consumer, but you're working with some of your firm-wide teams outside of your division. It requires a lot of facilitation, coordination. And so some of those challenges I would say is good communication is really important. So you need good coordination, program management, my specialty, and then as well as communication across the board to make sure you're steering the ship the right way. Or one of my old bosses used to refer it to, there's lots of planes landing and you need air traffic controllers to make sure no one's crashing into each other.
Yeah, and I think I see this a lot in my role. I work with a large amount of our customers, both prospects and existing customers, and the coordination is one of the most challenging things. It's making sure your business teams, your technology teams are both aligned on what's expected and what you're trying to develop. And many times that gets even harder when you think about your existing infrastructure. So typically within a lot of the banks that I've talked to, they're not as far along on their cloud journey as they typically would like. And one of the key things that they're looking for is how can we properly get to the cloud while still working with an on-prem infrastructure? May that be connecting to services or pulling data out from those. So I've seen that quite a bit. But one of the cool things about really Marcus and the work that Tanya and her team have been able to do is that they're really building from scratch. They're working within an environment where they have the funding from the broader firm, but able to create these new products that didn't exist in the market for that bank. But there's quite a bit that comes from that, as well as with legacy infrastructure as well, that you might still need to interact with. But first, I'd like to really start by talking about what some of those opportunities are that, Tanya, you and your team see as a result of that starting from scratch.
Yeah. So one of the things many of our leaders have said is because we have the opportunity to start from scratch and think about it as a white piece of paper, again, thinking about our customers, we don't have that legacy, right? Where other banks have that brick and mortar and have started their technology build based on that. We had an opportunity to really build it out from scratch, not thinking about brick and mortar, really thinking about our customers. I remember, and now I'm going to go into a story mode. I remember going into one of the offices and our product and design team had sketched out what onboarding looked like. and we were obsessed with reducing the steps. But visually, it was really important to like put it all out and see what are the steps we can keep removing to make it easier and easier for someone to onboard. Another thing we focused on is like language. Terms and conditions can be very complicated, and so we were really focused on how do we make this as simple as possible so people know what they're signing up for. There are times when I personally try to sign up for something and I don't do it because I'm like, I can't even understand this, and I'm someone who works in finance. The other thing we've been lucky to do is that we've been able to build this like single financial cloud platform that gives us the flexibility and scale to add on additional products. And so that's something we've been very fortunate because we don't have that legacy with us. And so we've been able to build out, our Apple Card, our GM card. We've built out as well as deposits, our loans business, and then integrating some of those buys that I mentioned earlier, like Green Sky, as well as Clarity Money. And I think that's hitting my points.
Excellent. So I think we obviously talked about kind of the benefits of building from scratch, which not many folks are really kind of in that position many times. But what are some of the challenges that are unique to that you might also be facing?
Yeah, so when you're building from scratch, you might think something will take X time, and you quickly realize that time has now doubled or tripled. And you might try to reconsider or assess, do we continue down this path? And there's definitely been moments in this journey where we've decided that it might be more beneficial to actually buy something. And so a great example of that is, maybe Christian, you remember, we were building out the app internally, and then we realized it might be better to actually acquire Clarity Money that had already an app. And so some of those things are the challenges that you're facing as you're building things. And I think it's realizing as well, does it still make sense, right? And I've listened to lots of like podcasts on builds and things like that. And so I think it's important to be able to recognize if you need to pivot and move in a different direction if it doesn't align with the strategy or the timeline that you're trying to march towards.
Yeah, and I think the other piece to it is like you mentioned it's a bit about the communication, but when you are really approaching changing how you're building software inside of a bank and you're thinking about different tools that you're using, like one of the other pieces is like managing that influence over other parts of the organization and how you communicate with them. Can you talk a little bit about that process and some of the tips that you might have around that?
Yeah, and so we're very fortunate where within the firm we have everybody's a cheerleader for our business, and everybody wants to see us be very successful. But there are still processes that we need to follow, whether that is going to a new activity committee or other committees to be able to present what are the things that we want to build. Because risk management is something that's very important at Goldman Sachs, and that's why we've been able to be really successful. And so there's a lot of coordination in regards to informing people, educating people, and getting people comfortable with what we're doing, but also having the right controls in place as we think about our builds. And so that's something that's always at the forefront is as we're building things for our customers, but we also want to make sure we have the right controls in place. We've taken into account different regulatory rules that might apply, talking to compliance, talking to legal, and some of the processes to disperse the information can still be a little bit archaic.
And that totally makes sense. And one of the things that I see, especially across a lot of my customers and in how they're thinking about digitizing their operations, is not just really in their major kind of business lines where they're trying to launch new products or kind of re-platform capabilities. Another really big area that I'm actually seeing folks talk through is their end user computing or user developed app space, sometimes known as EUCs or UDAs. It's really a fancy term for taking Excel macros and tools like Excel and then using them for day-to-day business processes. So a lot of like what I've been talking to with my customers, because they may not be as far along in their cloud journey, is how do we actually think about these risky types of applications that sit across, sometimes citizen development is what it's referred to, but usually just business users and various operations folks across my company. And that's really where Uncork has kind of also been found a pretty good niche, because essentially taking these applications, moving them to the cloud, but also creating real software out of them, which as a regulator would view them, typically they'd be concerned if you're not kind of removing the EUC kind of label from them at the end of the day. So
Tell me more, Christian.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
So I think a lot of what we typically find, especially for larger banks, is that when they're global in nature, your processes might differ between different regions. And when end user computing comes into place, that might mean you have two different macros for APAC and then for the US. Say you then add new products to your business line, you also end up in a world where your system doesn't actually meet the full requirements, and then a new macro then gets developed. And then the whole even bigger challenge you then face is within the governance of that. So how are you actually making sure that those EUCs are being looked at on a quarterly basis? How do you make sure the analyst who just joined doesn't change something in the macro, and then 3 days later you find out $10 million just disappeared into thin air because of a trading process that went awry? So I've had a lot of conversations, and we have a couple of customers really focused on how do you actually build that framework, how do you deploy it, how do you actually get citizen developers in the process with engineering to actually make this a really great output for your org. So I think in general that's an additional space, especially for digitizing your bank and bringing it into the cloud, where I see Uncork as having taken quite a bit of a large foot or scale impact on some of our customers. So I think really kind of when I think about these types of digitization efforts, be it with like the full scale business operations that you're trying to bring to the cloud, or even to even if it's on-prem with a partnership of that, that's really where I see a lot of value. So kind of shifting a little bit more back to kind of Tanya and across her business lines, with a no-code platform like Uncork, obviously it can accelerate a lot of work and really help you with the delivery process. And I'd love to hear from you about like your thoughts on that and what you've seen.
Yeah, so I've been fortunate enough where Kaven and Christian gave me a demo, and I was really impressed with the demo that I saw and how quickly, hearing that they're able to put certain use cases to pilot. Because as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of coordination. You need your product, your designers, you need your developers, you need fraud, you need risk, you need keeps going on. And so being able to see that you can do that quickly and is customizable was something that was appetizing to me. So looking forward to learning more about that. But some of the things that I thought was interesting where we'd be able to leverage that technology is like building certain workflows within like our agent side, which I'll get into in our next question.
I think when you think about that business stack, would love to hear a little bit more about the thoughts on the no-code tooling and specifically the agent stack. Would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, and so what we were exploring was potentially case management. And so I'm not sure how familiar you are with it, but once, let's say everybody probably has a credit card at one point, or a debit card. At one point, you're going to call an agent or maybe text message an agent, depending on the capabilities of your credit card. But then one of the things we're really interested is how does an agent handle that case? And how do we minimize the amount of time an agent has to switch from different tools to be able to answer the question? That also minimizes the amount of cost, right? Because an agent is able to be more efficient, and it also reduces the time to answer back a question to a customer. And so case management was something that I think we're really interested in exploring more about. We use various vendors right now to be able to do that process. And as we look to optimize it, that is also time that we have to work with them and our developers to enhance and make things more effective.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important thing to note, because I think a lot of times when we think about like a lot of the digitization, many times we're thinking about really the business side where the customer might be getting a new type of application, a website, but really there are internal functions that make your day-to-day process that you do when you show up at work, like where's your task list, which a case management functionality, and for those who are attending tomorrow, you'll hear a lot about some really cool stuff that we're launching around these capabilities, but these types of agent user interfaces or day-to-day task management tools, because you've got both the back-end capability of Uncork to build out those workflows and also the front-end UX that automatically generates from your drag and drop, you basically end up in a world where you're kind of shrinking the amount of effort that's required to build these systems and also making it much quicker to develop them as well. So we've seen these like agent user interface as well as even exception management tools. So kind of going back to that use case of an end user computing app, rather than having the person go hit the Excel macro, they wait 45 minutes, 100 rows pop out, and then they've got to upload something into another system and call a couple people to make sure things went through. Rather than that, you can actually have the straight-through processing of these exceptions popping up, bring it through a workflow that goes to another manager to review automatically through maybe a message that goes up in Teams or in an email, and then you can have that directly go pass through to the system, all with just an Uncork workflow that you've developed. So we see quite a bit of that. So I'm going to kind of bring us over to one kind of last question before we jump into the open Q&A. But this one's a little bit more of a fun one that I typically like to ask folks who are familiar with the Uncork platform. But if you could build any piece of software, Tanya, would love to know what that would be.
If I tell you, then I
won't take it.
Well, I'm just going to preface it by saying it might sound creepy, but the reason is I have a teenage daughter, so I would love some kind of software that would tell me what is she doing. Yes, I can track her on her phone, but it'd be great to know what are all the different interactions. We live in New York City. She takes public transportation, and so it'd be great from like a safety and mommy being nosy perspective.
I love that. Awesome. So I want to thank Tanya again, but before we kind of close out, would love to open it up to folks to ask any questions that might be top of mind.
And if no questions, I actually did have a question for you, Christian.
Oh my God, I'm being put on the spot. Excellent. Well, let's see if we got a question, then you can grill me.
Don't be shy, folks.
Can you give an example of an application or workflow you've built on Uncork? And Tanya, was that your team that built it? Did you use citizen developers, or what was the model that you used to implement that solution?
I'm going to pass it to Christian because we are not a client just yet. We're maybe soon to be.
So we have a pretty big footprint at Goldman more broadly, and a couple of use cases that are both from an early stage one that was a big supporter of Uncork, which is around really idea generation. So folks internally within Goldman can submit ideas, business cases, and then it actually goes through an entire workflow process for selection and then funding. And that's been a pretty fantastic program that the firm has been doing called Accelerate. And beyond that, we've been working through business cases such as private deal manufacturing. So you'll hear a little bit more about that tomorrow, where the process from a CRM system all the way downstream to the operations teams, legal teams, and folks that need to be coordinated to get a deal from kind of source to close have been set up in the Uncork platform. And that's actually a mixture between engineers, some product managers, and then also Uncork folks who've been partnering to develop that. So it's been a really cool collaboration across those teams. We do even have a couple folks who are just self-developing applications inside of their organization. So across the engineering team, we're actually speaking next month at AWS reInvent with that team specifically. They've created like a vendor platform to help manage across the firm how these vendors are being tracked, the cost, the spend, and then using that tool to help make a lot of the decisions around kind of future state spend as well. They have a roadmap of several other types of tools that include like program management type support features, but but I'll let Falarin, who's from that team, kind of speak more to it. But yeah, one of the coolest things really about like Goldman and many of our other customers is that they've also been part of influencing some of the new features in the platform. So the workflow tool itself was actually influenced by Goldman Sachs's requirements a couple years back. So we typically with our customers, we try to partner with them as much as possible around those requirements. So if there's like some citizen development type feature that a client is really interested in, we work really closely with folks to even embed those things into the platform. So we've seen quite a lot of success from that too.
First for Tanya. How far do you see your digitization going? And what roadblocks are you seeing in achieving that? Like, is it adoption? Is it mindset? Is it, attitude? Like, what are the things that you're seeing, and then how are you addressing those or looking to address those?
Great question. And so the way we plan to see this through is we're going to keep digitizing as much as possible. And it's all going to be dependent on like what are the customer needs and have we solved them, right? And so if we haven't solved those items, we're going to keep going down that path. And it's also going to be based on our partners. So like we're very focused on like how do we embed these products in our partners, and so they will also help inform what our strategy is and what are the things that they're solving for from their customers' perspective. I know I said I wouldn't speak about it, but we recently have formed a new business. It's going to be called Platform Solutions, and that's deeply focused on like embedding our financial products into our partners and that whole ecosystem. And so there is a big roadmap ahead.
This is for Tanya. How has been the experience of launching the Apple credit card? I know in the media, obviously there's a lot that comes, but internally the motions could be different. So just want to get a perspective on that.
So as someone who personally worked on it, it was really exciting. And so one of the great things about working with Apple is that they're just as passionate about their customers as we are. And it was really amazing to be able to create some technology that doesn't exist anywhere else. And we continue to make enhancements to do things like that. It was about over a 2-year build. I remember I bought like pajamas that I can have in the office to get comfortable, managing what we call like the war room, which we've renamed to the command center, which means as things are going live, you're getting feedback from customers, you're able to quickly put like a SWAT team and resolve those things. And so I'd say inside Goldman Sachs, the teams who's worked on Apple Card has been, very excited about all the things we've been doing there because nobody else has done this on the street, right? So like you can apply for a card and within seconds, you are able to know if you've been approved and you have a credit card immediately on your wallet. I've now also done it, you have the family plan, so you can add your children if they're 13 and older. So my daughter has one, and every day she goes to the store and buys bubble tea. And I can see what her transactions are, but she's also able to start to build her credit. And then I have also know people who weren't approved for the credit card, and we have a path to yes. Right. And so like if you do these things, you will be able to get this credit card, which is really cool. And one of the other latest innovations that we've had is that we're able to dynamically change the CVC. So that's like the last 3 digits on your credit card. So that this way, if you want to, it can change like on basically like a daily basis, and it makes it harder for fraudsters to be able to get your information. You just need to set that up. And actually, I lied, there's one more really cool thing, is, as you can see, I'm super passionate about it, is that you're able to see on your rewards, like how much are you getting on your rewards on a daily basis if you've updated to the latest iOS.
I know you said sounds like you're kind of early in the Uncork journey in your program and what you're managing there. Are you putting any strategies in place to perhaps set guardrails around where you would use, what use cases you would use a no-code platform like Uncork for? Or are you still kind of, let's see what it can do scenario?
So we're still in the early stages, but being Goldman, we like to have everything built in-house. And so there are definitely guardrails of where we would partner with like an Uncork to be able to deliver some things. For the areas we've been talking about, we're leveraging other vendors. So really there we're exploring what vendors better for us and able to offer us what we want. And also pricing is a big thing as well.
Any other questions before I get grilled with one?
Or I'm going to keep talking about the Apple Card or the
We'll
GM
talk about
card.
Apple Card.
Okay, we have a shy group. But Christian, I think you started to hit on these points. Love to know, like, what are the different services that Uncork provides, right? And that was something me and you were discussing. Like, is it a one size fits all? Are there different options?
Yeah, I think I've been at the company for almost 3 years now at this point, and I think I've seen quite a bit of evolution on what capabilities we have. And I think tomorrow is going to be a really cool, like, cherry on top of that, because it seems like every couple months we're constantly hearing from our customers about like, hey, we really think Uncork would be good in this area, and they feel like it's a niche for them. In reality, it's actually something all of our banks are asking for. And what we're developing at its core is really a platform that can build almost anything. Like, we're not a low latency platform. You're not going to build like a trading system on us, but you can build around that. But the components themselves are so kind of like at the small level that I've seen really impressive stuff. Like, I think a couple months ago, it's a really weird use case, but somebody created like a generator to review kind of submissions of an image, and then it would make a recommendation on whether or not it was a hot dog or not, which was like an odd kind of thing to build, but it was from that TV show Billions, I think. And it was more or less to test out like what's possible on this platform. And in the past like couple of years, I've seen everything from solutions that are building out marriage capabilities to help people get married digitally, which like beforehand, that's a process that typically you'd have to do in person. And now like we expected post-COVID potentially that would kind of come down a bit, but in reality, it's actually connected people who may be terminally ill and not able to actually go and get married in person, and now have the capability to do so. We have applications where customers are building full onboarding experiences that go all the way down to the agent system. So like really, I obviously see a lot of the financial services side of things, but when I think personally on like things that I'm passionate about, like we've even thought about diversity, equity, and inclusion inside of Uncork and are using it to actually manage and track with HR data kind of KPIs and metrics for each team member across the company to start building towards, hey, how do we meet those OKRs that our organization has around DE&I? And it's cool because that's something that some of our customers are interested in as well. So really like the sky's the limit for what's possible to build, but there's certain kind of guardrails of like we probably wouldn't want to be in that space, but it's not to say in the future if that's something our customers want, we wouldn't entertain it and figure out how to do it with them.
Maybe you should talk to New York City DOE if you haven't.
I think so.
They have, for people who are not familiar or have children in New York City education or New York City schools, once you get to high school, you can apply to about over 800 programs, and then they're matched through that. You get to pick 12 programs, and then your child is matched to the program based on various factors. Could be grades, could be location, could be a random number they're assigned you, and then they're able to match in. So as you were talking about that, I was just thinking about how your technology would be really helpful there.
I need to call some people.
And actually, if you don't mind, Christian, I'd love to hear what are some use cases people in this audience are thinking about. If anybody is not scared to be vocal.
Tanya's doing market research in the room for us.
Or what industries are the people in here? I think that's also, something I'm fascinated by.
So we have a lot of representation from financial services, insurance, public sector, and healthcare currently at the conference today. But I think we had some folks in also like tech industry that had signed up as well, so they might be floating around the crowd.
Okay. Well,
Hi. I'm from Chubb Insurance. So we started our Uncork journey 6 months back. And currently, at the early adoption phase, we are migrating our agent portal and customer portal to Uncork. So
We're gonna have to chat.
So basically, we have a marketplace where the agents sell their policies or the customer comes, right? Now, the new product that we are launching, so instead of that Angular marketplace, from there we are giving a link so that the new products will be sold in the new Uncork platform. And eventually, day by day, we will move our all other products from the Angular app to the Uncork app. This is our first use case that we're working on.
Awesome. Thank you. I think we have one more.
So I'm going to go into a spiel that I think Christian was on a phone call we were talking about. I think when you look at financial services, everyone thinks what we do is rocket science. Really, like you're launching a space, rocket to the moon, and you're trying to land it back down on Earth. So everyone thinks it's SpaceX. But in reality, it's a combination of workflows and data, right? You're taking inputs, putting it through a workflow, and coming to an output. And you're sharing that with someone, and then they do their steps. So what we're trying to do and prove out is, can we take the business that we're in and change it into just inputs and outputs and workflows? So when you start to engage new clients, instead of it being a 6 to 8 month journey onboarding, it can be not instantaneous, but the client can be part of that journey. So you take a 6 month journey and make it 1 month. Right, because that first interaction with your client makes or breaks what the next 10 years can be, right? If you have a bad taste in the beginning, you have to unwind that. So we're really trying to leverage Uncork and other things to prove that we can take something that appears to be highly complex and simplify it. We haven't gone that far yet, but we're exploring if it's possible or not.
I love that. Actually, one of the things I was just thinking about that maybe is another use case is like I was mentioning, as we're building new products, you have to get all of these committee approvals. And yes, now we have ETAS to do it, but ETAS only takes you so far. And so like that could be another great use case.
It's definitely a use case we can do. Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Oh, awesome.
So I'm from insurance as well. I'm from insurance as well, and we've been building embedded insurance, where we see insurance being part of a product's feature and not an afterthought. So if you're getting a car, it comes with insurance as part of the customer's journey. So similar to the embedded finance, we're plugging in insurance as part of the customer's end journey. So.
All insurance?
Awesome. Well, I do want to say a major thank you to Tanya for joining us today. I know she's got a busy week, so we thank you so much.
Well, thank you for everyone who's attending, and thank you for inviting me.